Please consider becoming a patron of MythVision Podcast. You'll get early access to every video, including this amazing one, and you can ask me personal questions, private message me, anything you'd like. Professor Elaine Pagels, why would you want to write a book about Satan?
Well, actually, Derek, it never occurred to me until I had some extraordinary setbacks, and the death of my husband, for example, and our son, and it was just crushing, both of those, and some well-meaning minister who did a funeral service said to me that I shouldn't be angry at God. And that really made me angry, because I thought, what are you talking about? I don't even know what you're talking about. Angry at God, that doesn't make any sense to me. I'd like to be angry at someone, but I don't think about God in a way that, he's doing this to me. That makes no sense. I would like to be angry at somebody. In the ancient world, they'd say, well, the person who throws obstacles in your way and blocks you isn't God, it's Satan. He's called diabolos, which is the word devil, right? But it means somebody literally who throws something in front of you, an obstacle, and suddenly you're confronted with something bad. So I thought in the ancient world, you could be angry at Satan. And I thought, well, I don't believe in Satan, so it would be nice to be angry at Satan. I mean, who came up with Satan anyway? Where did that come from, the stories about Satan? So I started to think, well, that would be interesting to find out. First thing I found out is Satan is hardly present in the Hebrew Bible at all. I mean, having been brought up by Christians, I thought Satan was in the Garden of Eden, right? In the form of the serpent. That's a Christian thing. It's not in Jewish understanding at all. The serpent is a serpent. There's no Satan there. And there's a couple of times when an angel of God is seen as putting obstacles in front of somebody. And usually the angel is sent to protect the person from his own folly. Like a prophet who's going to do what the Lord told him not to do, and God sends an angel to block him. And the word Satan in Hebrew means to obstruct. So this angel comes and it says, lo Satan lo, to block him. And then they call the blocker, the obstacle maker, the Satan. But he's an angel. In the Hebrew Bible, he's not an enemy of God. In the book of Job, as you know, the Lord is surrounded by an angelic court. So he's pictured as a kind of divine emperor, king. He has a huge court full of his servants, and many of them are kind of militant angels. And one of them is one who's been checking out people for the Lord. And he's sort of, somebody said, like an FBI informant. Like, the Lord says, oh, have you considered my servant Job? I mean, he's really upstanding. And the Satan, his job is to be, hey, a devil's advocate. So he says, oh, yeah, well, you think he's your faithful servant, but that's because look what you've given him. You gave him everything anybody could want. Wealth and family and prestige, and yeah, he's great. Now, if you took that stuff away from him, then you might find out that he wouldn't feel the same way about you. And so the Lord takes the bet and says, all right, well, you can do that and we'll see what happens. And in the story, the Satan, destroys all of his flocks, all of his wealth. Everything vanishes. A building collapses and kills his 12 children suddenly. And he realizes they're all dead. And then he is himself struck with a terrible agonizing skin illness. And his wife says, curse God and die. And he doesn't. He says, no. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So the Satan in the book of Job is not a bad figure. He's just one of God's servants who has a job to do. What's really interesting is when you start to read the Gospels and certain Jewish literature that comes up about that time, they start talking about a Satan figure like Mark. Jesus has the Holy Spirit come upon him, and immediately the Spirit drives him into confrontation with the evil one. And the Satan is a kind of spiritual power out in the desert, and the Satan is after him all the time. And it's God's Spirit against Satan, and that's the whole drama of Mark's Gospel. So how did this Satan figure, who invented that and why? And I began to realize that when groups talk about Satan, they're not just talking about some power up there in the stratosphere. They're actually talking about conflict right here down on earth. So if somebody says to you, Derek, Satan's trying to take over this country, Now that person knows exactly who he has in mind.
Exactly.
Right? He's got people in mind. And what he's telling you is, well, there's a conflict here on earth between me and those people. Those are Satan's people, and my people are God's people. So while they're seeing a supernatural battle, they're also talking about conflict between people. Good people and bad people. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. And Satan is a prominent figure in the New Testament. Why? So I thought, well, okay, let's figure this out. So I started to read the Gospel of Mark. Again, I taught it. I thought I knew what it said. So I said, okay, so who will be infused with the Spirit of God on earth? It'll be Jesus and the disciples, right? Those are God's people. Now, who's Satan's people? Well, that would be the people who opposed, killed, tortured, and executed Jesus. That would be the Roman governor and maybe the chief priests, powerful Jews and powerful Romans, right? That's what I thought. So I start to read Mark, and that's not what I found. I was amazed because even though we know historically that Jesus was crucified by the Romans, in Mark's gospel, in Matthew's gospel, in Luke's gospel, and even more in John's, the only people who are seen as blamed or responsible are Jews. Judas is the betrayer in chief, right? He's seen in the worst pit of hell. The worst of the worst is Judas, who betrayed his own master. And then there's other Jews, and then the Jews are telling Pilate to kill him. And Pilate says, no. What's he done? He's an innocent man. And no. Crucify him. And Pilate is standing there saying, wait a minute, I want to release him. And the Jews are screaming for blood. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. In the New Testament, it's only Jews who are associated with Satan. It's not the Romans. But historically, we know that it was the Romans who crucified Jesus because they thought he was a threat to the Roman Empire. He was inciting revolution. That's what the charge was that he was crucified for. So what's going on? It was really strange to me. And after thinking about it a whole lot, I realized these Gospels are written, 40, 50, 60 years after the death of Jesus. And then there was the Jewish War, real revolution against Rome, and the Romans crushed the Jewish people, and they were policing it ferociously. And if you looked anything like a revolutionary, they'd get rid of you. They'd crucify you too. So followers of Jesus knew that they were under suspicion. They were followers of somebody who was convicted of insurrection against Rome. And all the important leaders were killed. Peter was crucified by the Romans, Paul was beheaded, and James was stoned to death. So it was very dangerous to be a follower of Jesus because you were instantly suspect of insurrection. So what do? Because the Romans, someone like Suetonius says, yeah, that Jesus, he was put to death by our governor Pontius Pilate, for some insurrection against Rome. That's what the Romans immediately thought about Jesus. So his followers write a message and they say, no, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. First of all, he wasn't an insurrectionist. And I think myself that he was not. Certainly not armed insurrection. He was not a fighter in that way, military. Second, they said, not only was he not an insurrectionist, but the governor knew it. And if you understand, Pilate was trying to be fair. Pilate was trying to do justice. The only reason that he was crucified that way is that his own people were screaming for blood, and Pilate was a weak guy and he gave in. Okay, that's the way they tell the story. But if you look at what Jews knew about Pilate, you see, that's not the real man, Because Jews who were politically savvy, like Philo in Egypt, contemporary of Jesus, who went on ambassadorship to the emperor on behalf of the Jewish community, very wealthy, prominent, well-educated Jewish leader. He said, Pilate? We know Pilate. He's ruthless, he's brutal, he's cruel. He crucifies people with no trial all the time. Everybody knows he's heartless. He despises Jews. I say, really? That's not what he looks like in the Gospels.
Right.
And Josephus, Pilate? Yeah, well, Pilate, he crushes crowds. If a crowd starts demonstrating in front of his residence, the way they did when he brought Roman battalions into Jerusalem, they rioted for 5 days. What did he do? Give in? No. He sent the soldiers out there in plain clothes with the concealed weapons, got a signal, and they started killing people, dispersing the crowd by just slaughtering and killing as many as they could, and the crowd dispersed. Right? That's how Pilate did crowd control. He did it the way it's done today in Syria, say, and other parts of the world. So why do the Gospels tell it this way? I finally realized that they're trying to save their lives and say, look, you got it wrong. Jesus was not an insurrectionist, neither are we, because the evil people here were the Jews. And they were pretty helpless too. And so I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So they wanted to picture Pilate acting the way they wished a Roman governor would act and be fair. Say, what evil has this man done? Is he really a revolutionary? No, he's not a revolutionary. I'm going to let him go. These Christians are quite innocuous. They just have another idea about God. Who cares?
Right.
So the point of it is, I realize that when people talk about Satan, first of all, they are talking about people, as we said. Second, I was totally surprised, Derek, because I was looking at sort of old folk tales about Satan, and I thought, these are funny old stories. Just made up silly stories about Satan. And I was thinking that I would deal with the feeling I had about my own griefs by sort of writing a story about Satan. And I thought it was kind of all fiction. And suddenly it landed me in the real world, in which Christians, even after they became powerful and were no longer endangered, saw Jews as evil and identified Jews with Satan. Mm-hmm. And when the first Christian emperor, Constantine, when the law codes were changed after Constantine, as one writer said, Christian prejudices against the Jews were turned into legal disabilities. So if you were a rabbi 30 years after Constantine is emperor, and you convert someone to become Jewish, you could be burned alive. That's the penalty. And so Jews were targeted and humiliated and marginalized in Christian legal codes. And then, if you look at Europe, they were forced to live in certain areas. They could not inherit property. There were all kinds of laws against Jews, and there have been for 2,000 years. And it comes out of this heritage. It's saying the Jews killed Jesus.
So this, it runs deep.
It does.
This is a very fascinating way of looking at all of this. To me, I do think it's interesting. We just finished on the book of Revelation. Okay, we just talked about that, and now we got into the Satan book. But what I find interesting is this man John dared to try and hide in code the best he could, really talking about the truth. Whereas, he does kind of, I think, talk about collaborators with Rome, but mainly Rome is the monster. Whereas in the Gospels and in these other writings, Rome is definitely a monster, but we got to put them in. What I'm saying is historically speaking, they were a monster. But in the narratives that we're reading, they're not. Why are they not saying it like John's saying it?
Yes, John says, who killed Jesus? Well, don't ask me. You know who killed Jesus. The Romans did. It's the evil empire that did that. And it was. But the Gospels totally soft pedal it. And it isn't because they want to be nice to Romans. It's that they want to be safe in the Roman Empire and say, you have no quarrel with us. We're not insurrectionists. We're innocent like Jesus. It's those Jews that did it. It was a Jewish quarrel. It has nothing to do with you. And the trouble is, it's played itself out for 2,000 years. I was surprised at what I found. I was shocked. I said, wait a minute. Is there anti-Semitism in the New Testament? My New Testament professor at Harvard said, absolutely not. But then he was an ex-Nazi. And everybody else said, yeah, there is. But it's hidden. It's not really too overt. But when I finally sent the book I wrote, and I was kind of shocked by what I'd found, to a friend of mine, he read it. He said, I sat up all night reading your book. I never knew why they called me a Christ killer when I was in high school in Boston.
Now you know.
He said, I never killed anybody. I don't know what they're talking about. But the idea that the Jews killed Jesus has pervaded Christian anti-Semitism and given fuel to it. I'm not saying Christianity is entirely responsible for anti-Semitism, because there was anti-Semitism before there was Christianity, actually.
Yeah.
But it gave a moral purpose to anti-Semitism. Those people killed God's Son.
I also think it helped, and this is horrible, but what I'm saying is I think it helped latch on to a Gentile world even better, because insider outsider stuff. Look at how Jews view Gentiles, right?
Yes.
Look at Second Temple Judaism. We found something that sees us positive and you negative. Guess what? We have our belief now, and it's called Christianity. It's the perfect opposite now of these things. And even if the intentions, so now we're kind of getting into the intentions here and what you're describing here, and I think it's it makes perfect sense what you're saying. My question then would be, if it's anti-Semitic, and I've asked this of Rabbi Tovia Singer, and he goes, well, you do know there have been Jews that are anti-Semitic, right? They're kind of turncoats, if you will. They don't even like their own race at this point, in the sense. So my question is, who wrote these, right? So if they're Jews that were initially writing this as like, let's butt kiss and be nice and not get in trouble, and blame it on the leadership, because it seems to me that's the first thing they're doing, is they're blaming leadership. Like Essenes, look at how they viewed the temple leaders, right? Screw these guys. These guys are pieces of junk. Well, that could easily evolve into, well, it wasn't just the leader, all the people. It's all Jews, period.
Well, actually, you see, the Gospels are different.
Right.
Mark is the first one, and it says, well, who who was trying to kill Jesus? There were certain people in the temple who got very angry when he created a disturbance in the temple. And he wouldn't even tell them what authority he had. He was very defiant. He felt he was a prophet, and they were very angry. So there were certain temple leaders, and they took him to Pilate, and they turned him over. But Matthew says the whole nation cried out, "Crucify him." Now that is strange, but it's in Matthew 27. It says the whole people, ethnos is the Greek word, the whole nation. Well, the whole nation of Jews absolutely were not against Jesus, because the Gospels say he was very popular. He was surrounded by crowds. Crowds loved him. That's why they couldn't arrest him in public, right? Because they were afraid of the Jews.
Right.
That is, they were afraid that people would protect him if they sent an arresting party of soldiers. So they had to arrest him secretly at night. But it's very weird. The Gospels will say the crowds love Jesus. And suddenly it's like they switch. And it says the crowds are screaming for blood. It's very odd. And in John's Gospel, so as one writer said, the further you get from history, the more evil the Jews become. In John's Gospel, Pilate says, the Jews hate you. They're trying to kill you. Why? They're your own people. They turned you over to me. I don't have any problem with you. Your own people did this. And John says the Jews were trying to kill Jesus.
See, it's like, and I don't want to give this to throw us off, but you know how Bart wrote, Dr. Ehrman wrote, how Jesus became God, there's an evolution. Yeah. Well, that's kind of what you're describing here is the butt kissing of the Romans by whoever these authors were, and Mark might have been a Gentile Christian or could have been a Jew who was just a Christian. I don't know with certainty, do you?
No, probably we think that 3 of the gospel writers were Jewish, Mark, Matthew, and John, and not Luke. But it isn't just that. It could have been factual that leaders of the temple said, and one Roman historian says, John has an accurate picture, the Jewish leaders got together and said, this man is stirring up crowds everywhere. If this keeps going on, there are going to be demonstrations, even more than there were when he came into Jerusalem acting like a king. We can't let this happen. The Romans are going to come in here with troops and destroy the whole city, which is, of course, what happened.
It is interesting, too, that what happens in the 90s, like we know the Gospel of John's at least 90s or later, and that's just scholarship, period. Anything earlier, it's like, that's hard for me to swallow. But you have Jews kicking Christians out of synagogue. Yes. So you have good reasons to say by the time these later Gospels come, there's more than just, hey, the real history here, that the real Jews, there were Jewish leaders that were against Jesus is a problem. But guess what? We keep having problems with these Jewish synagogues and these practices, Judaizers, et cetera, et cetera. They're the enemy. And the polemics start showing up even deeper in later Gospels.
You're right. It is in the Gospel of John, that chapter 9, about how the man born blind comes to see Jesus as a healer and then as the Messiah, the Son of God. And then he's in danger of being thrown out of the synagogue. It's a picture, as you said, of what's going on in John's own time. Matthew 2 is after the war. And the Jewish Sanhedrin, the council, has been given a lot of power over Jewish communities. And they don't like these Jesus believers. They see them as traitors. So in Matthew 25, Jesus calls them all kinds of terrible names, sons of hell. I doubt that Jesus ever spoke to his own people that way. But Matthew wants him to, because they're saying that Jesus of yours, he was illegitimate, he was a fake, he was a magician, he wasn't a prophet. He leads people astray from the Lord. He leads them to devalue their own traditions. That's what's going on in Matthew's time. So you're right. When you go, generations beyond the time of Jesus, and there is real animosity in the Jewish community, that's when these start to get written more negatively. And furthermore, the rabbi you speak of, we can't even call it anti-Semitic, because it's anti-Jewish. But anti-Semitism is a 19th century construction about race. It's an invention, that there's it's a different doctrine that these people are genetically inferior. Or, black people are genetically inferior. It's about the way groups in European circles see themselves as the master race, you know? So anti-Semitism is later, but anti-Judaism starts way back there.
Wow. Yeah. And anyone who claimed to be a Jew would obviously fall into that trap, and history is ugly when it comes to that. So this just goes to show you Satan ends up being whoever your enemies are, really. And they work for Satan.
The name of Satan, he has many names, Beelzebul and Beliar, which probably means without light. But the name that to me suits him best is Mastema, which means hatred. It's about hatred. And he is a force that creates conflict and hatred. And the way that Satan kind of operates in these texts suggests that the enemies of Jesus are his own people. And it's tragic.
That's exactly how John opens. The Gospel
Pardon
of
me?
John opens just like that. And he came to his own, and his own received him not.
Right.
It's like, whoa, who are his own? Well, the Jewish people.
His people. And
His
it
people.
says, the people who do not recognize the name of the Son of God, are condemned to eternal hell. So it's really a powerful story. And to me, it's been a very moving story and sad, to see. One of my friends said, well, but Elaine, isn't it Christianity all about love? And I said, at its best it is. But there's an undertone there, which I never even noticed before.
Wow.
Which has allowed for Christians to demonize Jews. And then other people too. Native Americans or anybody who doesn't worship the way they do. But this was a part of Christianity I was ignorant of. And I didn't want to find it. But I think we need to know about it because it's part of our history.
Thank you.